The Cold War. Hello and welcome to this video on some facts about the Cold War. The Cold War was a period of political tension and military rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union that lasted from the end of World War II in 1945 until the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. It was called the Cold War because there was no direct military conflict between the two superpowers, but instead they engaged in a constant competition for global influence and ideological dominance. Origins of the Cold War. The origins of the Cold War can be traced back to the end of World War II, when the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as the world's two dominant superpowers. The two countries had very different political and economic systems. The United States was a capitalist democracy, while the Soviet Union was a communist dictatorship. The United States and its allies were determined to contain the spread of communism, while the Soviet Union sought to spread its ideology throughout the world. Tensions between the two superpowers began to escalate in 1947, when the United States adopted the Truman Doctrine, which provided military and economic assistance to countries threatened by communist expansion. This was followed by the Marshall Plan, which provided massive economic aid to Western Europe to help rebuild after World War II. The Soviet Union saw these actions as an attempt to encircle and isolate them, and responded with their own aggressive policies. The arms race. One of the defining features of the Cold War was the arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both countries developed and tested increasingly powerful nuclear weapons, and built up massive stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction. This arms race led to a constant state of fear and anxiety, as people worried about the possibility of a nuclear war. Proxy Wars. Although the United States and the Soviet Union did not engage in direct military conflict, they did fight a number of proxy wars, in which they supported opposing sides in conflicts around the world. Some of the most well-known examples include the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The end of the Cold War. The Cold War began to thaw in the 1980s, as Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev implemented a series of reforms aimed at modernizing the Soviet economy and political system. Gorbachev also sought to improve relations with the West, and negotiated a number of arms control agreements with the United States. In 1989, the Soviet Union withdrew from Afghanistan, and a series of democratic revolutions swept through Eastern Europe. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, marking the end of the Cold War. The United States emerged as the world's sole superpower, and the geopolitical landscape of the world was fundamentally transformed. Frequently asked questions. Why was it called the Cold War? It was called the Cold War because there was no direct military conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, but instead they engaged in a constant competition for global influence and ideological dominance. What was the Truman Doctrine? The Truman Doctrine was a policy adopted by the United States in 1947, which provided military and economic assistance to countries threatened by communist expansion. What was the Marshall Plan? The Marshall Plan was a massive economic aid program launched by the United States in 1948, which provided assistance to Western European countries to help them rebuild after World War II. What were some of the proxy wars fought during the Cold War? Some of the most well-known proxy wars include the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. What was the arms race? The arms race was a competition between the United States and the Soviet Union to build up massive stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction, particularly nuclear weapons. How did the Cold War end? The Cold War ended with the collapse of Soviet Union. Like the video and remember to subscribe to our channel.